East Longmeadow police were called to Lee Street on Saturday night after a man allegedly threatened his neighbor with a gun over a disagreement about their dogs playing. Around 10:30 on Saturday night, officers arrived and found one man identified as 48-year-old Philip Pelchat in his driveway with a gun in hand. Instead of dropping it, he went inside his home, only to return unarmed with another resident. Officers spoke with the neighbor, who said his dog had gotten loose and ran into Pelchat's yard. When he went to get the dog, Pelchat threatened to shoot them both. And upon investigating, officers found several unsecured guns in Pelchat's home, including the pistol he had earlier. He was arrested and now faces multiple weapons charges and was arraigned in Palmer District Court this morning.